could shock because a single voice spoken under oath can rearrange entire power structures. One testimony can do what years of journalism, whispers, and leaked documents never quite manage: force names, dates, and methods into the open at the same time. That is the unsettling reality at the heart of Witness D's story, not because he was famous, not because he was powerful, but because, for a brief moment, he connected dots that were never meant to touch, and once that happened, silence was no longer an option. What follows is not just the story of a killing. It is the story of what made that killing necessary to someone, somewhere. When Witness D took the stand, he did not arrive as a hero or a crusader. He arrived as an insider-adjacent figure, someone who had seen systems work from the inside and learned how easily procedure can be bent without being visibly broken. His words mattered because they were specific. They carried operational weight. They described how instructions moved, how favors were returned, and how certain people always seemed insulated when things went wrong. This was not speculation. It was architecture. Before the testimony, Witness D was largely unknown to the public. In institutional terms, he was replaceable. In narrative terms, he was invisible. But invisibility is often what allows someone to see everything. He described meetings that never appeared on calendars, phone calls that were never logged, and decisions that were always framed as coincidences after the fact. Listening closely, one could sense that this was not a story of chaos, but of coordination. Disorder leaves fingerprints. Systems leave patterns. Inside the commission room, the shift was subtle but unmistakable. The air changed not when accusations were made, but when timelines aligned. Dates matched movements. Names reappeared in unrelated contexts. What had previously sounded like isolated incidents began to feel like repetitions of the same script. This is usually the moment when testimony becomes dangerous, when it stops being about what someone did and starts being about how things are done. Witness D did not dramatize his account. That restraint made it heavier. He spoke in the language of routine: who called whom, who authorized what, which processes were bypassed, and which ones were deliberately followed to create cover. Procedure, he implied, was not the obstacle to wrongdoing. It was the camouflage. That idea alone unsettled many observers because it challenged a comforting belief that corruption is loud, sloppy, and easy to spot. After the testimony, according to people close to him, Witness D became cautious in ways he had not been before. Not paranoid, but precise. He reportedly changed routines, avoided predictable patterns, and spoke less freely, even to those he trusted. These were not the actions of someone seeking attention. They were the behaviors of someone who understood that information, once released, cannot be taken back, and that consequences often lag just long enough to feel unreal. To understand why his words carried such weight, it helps to understand how commissions function. They are designed to surface truth through process: sworn statements, cross-examination, and public record. Their strength lies in transparency. Their weakness lies in timing. Truth often emerges faster than protection systems can respond. When a witness steps forward with material that implicates multiple layers, political, administrative, operational, the window between exposure and retaliation becomes perilously thin. Patterns of intimidation rarely announce themselves directly. Investigators look for escalation rather than threats, unexplained surveillance, subtle inquiries framed as friendly concern, warnings disguised as advice. When none of that works, history shows a familiar progression: discredit the witness, delay proceedings, shift public focus, and in the darkest cases, remove the source entirely. None of these steps require a single mastermind. They only require aligned interests. The logistics surrounding Witness D's killing immediately raised questions because they fit too neatly into known risk profiles. Timing, location, and method all suggested forethought rather than spontaneity. This does not prove orchestration, but it does challenge narratives of randomness. Random acts tend to be messy. This was not. It appeared efficient, which is often what makes such cases so difficult to unravel. Efficiency leaves fewer loose ends, but it also implies experience. In the days surrounding his death, fragments of information surfaced and disappeared just as quickly. Conflicting accounts, partial confirmations, official statements that answered some questions while carefully avoiding others. This fog is not unusual after high-profile killings, but it plays a critical role. Confusion buys time. Time allows narratives to harden. Once people settle on a version of events, even an incomplete one, it becomes harder to dislodge. At this midpoint of the story, one uncomfortable reality becomes unavoidable. Witness D's testimony did not exist in isolation. It echoed earlier cases where individuals who threatened to expose interconnected wrongdoing found themselves marginalized, silenced, or worse. Different provinces, different years, same underlying structure. When patterns repeat across contexts, coincidence becomes an increasingly fragile explanation. The idea of hidden networks often sounds conspiratorial, but networks do not require secrecy to exist. They require familiarity, repeated collaboration, mutual protection. Over time, informal alliances can become more powerful than formal hierarchies because they operate beneath them. Witness D's testimony suggested that such networks thrive not by breaking rules outright, but by selectively enforcing them. What makes these networks resilient is dual pressure. On one side, political imperatives, control, loyalty, optics. On the other, criminal opportunity, money, contracts, leverage. Where those pressures overlap, accountability weakens. Decisions are no longer judged by legality alone, but by usefulness. Witness D described this overlap not as an exception, but as a normalized operating environment. There are striking parallels with other cases where witnesses or investigators faced fatal outcomes after nearing similar conclusions. The details differ, but the arcs align. Initial cooperation, escalating tension, delayed protection, sudden violence, and prolonged uncertainty afterward. Each case, examined alone, can be dismissed. Examined together, they begin to tell a different story, one about systemic vulnerability rather than individual tragedy. Former investigators, speaking cautiously and often without attribution, have long acknowledged that witness protection is only as strong as the institutions backing it. Protective measures fail not only because of resource constraints, but because of leaks. Information moves, schedules circulate, safe locations become known. In environments where trust is compromised, protection becomes performative rather than effective. The deeper question, then, is not simply who killed Witness D, but why the conditions existed for his killing to be possible. Transparency without safety becomes exposure. Courage without backup becomes risk. Witness D stepped into a space where truth was requested, but security lagged behind. That gap is where danger lives. As the story reaches its final stretch, attention shifts from the act itself to its aftermath. What changes after a witness is killed? Public outrage flares, then fades. Investigations are announced, then slowed. Reforms are promised, then diluted. The system absorbs the shock and continues, altered only at the margins. This endurance is often mistaken for stability, when it may actually signal resistance to change. If reforms do come, they will likely arrive quietly. Revised protocols, adjusted thresholds, new committees. Rarely do they address the underlying culture that allows informal power to outrank formal accountability. Witness D's death forces a reckoning with that culture, even if the reckoning remains unresolved. In the end, the most unsettling aspect of this story is not the violence itself, but the logic behind it. Someone believed that silencing one person was easier than confronting what he revealed. That belief tells us everything about the balance of power Witness D disrupted, and why his testimony still matters, even in his absence.